All right, let's jump right in. Today we're looking at a pretty radical theory from a researcher named George Washington Carey. He put forward this idea that the word Christ, well, it isn't about a historical person at all. Instead, he claimed it's a sacred biological process that's happening inside your body right now. The idea is that ancient scriptures aren't history books, they're actually a kind of biological blueprint. So let's see what that's all about.
So the entire theory really boils down to this one pretty provocative idea. You see, it argues that the Greek word Christos, it doesn't just mean anointed one in some kind of metaphorical way. Nope. It literally means an oil or an ointment. And that might sound like a small detail, but according to this theory, it's not. It's actually the key that could unlock a completely different way of understanding these ancient texts.
Okay, so if Christ is an oil, where is it? Well, according to this research, it's inside you, right now. The core claim here is that this Christ is a real internal biochemical substance, a kind of holy oil or chrism that your body actually produces every single month.
And what's really interesting is that this isn't talked about as some vague spiritual energy. Not at all. In his book from way back in 1918, George Washington Carey gets super specific. He points to a physical origin, two tiny little glands right in the center of your brain, the pineal and the pituitary. He says that's where this precious substance comes from.
So just to be super clear here, the whole foundation of this theory rests on this one reinterpretation. The argument is that for some of these early esoteric groups, Christos wasn't a name. It was a technical term, a word for a specific physiological substance.
Okay, so if this knowledge was so important, so fundamental, where did it go? What happened to it? Well, this is where the theory takes a pretty dramatic turn. It suggests that this internal wisdom wasn't just lost, it was deliberately suppressed, flipped on its head even.
And the source points to one very specific moment in time, the year 325 AD. This was the year that the Roman Emperor Constantine called together the Council of Nicaea. And according to this theory, that event, well, it changed everything.
Now, the argument here is that the Council of Nicaea wasn't just some friendly religious get-together. The source claims it was a straight-up political move. The idea is that they literally took a vote, and by a pretty narrow margin, they decided to turn all these internal physiological symbols into external historical people. So Christ, the internal oil, became Jesus Christ, the historical man. And the goal? Well, the alleged goal was to make everyone dependent on an outside church for their salvation, instead of teaching them how to find it within themselves.
And you can see this supposed inversion in some really key symbols. For instance, the sacred oil from inside your brain became the sacramental wine you drink. The nervous bread, a substance said to come from the solar plexus, became a processed wheat wafer. And get this, even the word for sin, hamartia, originally just meant to miss the target, like in archery. The idea was you missed the mark if you failed to raise this sacred oil up your spine. But that got twisted into this heavy moral concept of guilt.
So that brings us to the next big piece of the puzzle. If these stories in the Bible aren't about history, then what are they about? The source says the Bible is actually an allegorical map of the human body. The Holy Land isn't a place on a map. The Holy Land is you.
So if we follow this anatomical map, the famous River Jordan is actually a symbol for your spinal cord. It's the central river of life that this sacred oil has to travel down.
And it keeps going. Bethlehem, which literally translates to house of bread, is said to be your solar plexus. This big nerve center in your gut is seen as the manger where the sacred seed, this bread from heaven, is born every month.
And then we get to the really big one. Golgotha, the place of the skull, the site of the crucifixion. It's not some hill outside Jerusalem. The word itself, in Aramaic, literally means skull. The theory claims the real crucifixion is an energetic event happening inside your own head.
The parallels even extend to the numbers. The 12 tribes of Israel? This theory says that's an allegory for your 12 pairs of cranial nerves. And what about the 33 years of Christ's life? Well, that's said to correspond to the 33 vertebrae of your spine, the very ladder this sacred energy needs to climb.
So how is this whole monthly journey supposed to work? Okay, so it starts with the oil being secreted up in the brain. From there, it travels down to the solar plexus. Now, here's the crucial part. You have to preserve this substance. If you do, it doesn't just dissipate. Instead, it starts to rise back up the spine. And when it gets to the base of the skull, there's this energetic event, the crucifixion, where its power is amplified, like 1,000 times over. And that final burst allows it to reach the pineal gland and supposedly trigger a state of illumination.
So when you boil it all down, this whole theory is really presenting you with a choice. It's shifting the focus away from just believing in an external savior to actively participating in an internal regenerative process.
But why would anyone want to suppress this kind of knowledge? Well, the answer given by the source is pretty simple. Control. Think about it. If you knew you had the built-in, innate technology for your own spiritual regeneration, you wouldn't need a middleman, would you? You can't really be controlled with promises of heaven or threats of hell if you hold the keys yourself.
So what we're left with are two completely different visions of reality. On one hand, you have the system that says Christ was a historical man, salvation is about belief, and heaven is something you get to, maybe, after you die. And on the other hand, you have this supposedly suppressed knowledge that says the Christ principle is an internal process you can do now, that regeneration is possible in this body, and that heaven is actually a state of consciousness you can achieve in this life.
And I want to leave you with this really powerful question that the source material poses. It's not about giving you an answer, but just prompting a new way of thinking about all this. It asks you to wonder, how many of these monthly cycles have just passed by completely unnoticed while you were busy searching in external temples for a truth that was already circulating in your own veins?